Hi, it's Dr. Games, and I wanted to give you a review that you might not get from some of the others that I've seen out there on the net. And it's of the new PlayStation 4, so brand new on the market here. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was the internet setup. It was relatively easy to set up the rest of the box. It's just two USB plugs for the keyboard and for the controller. But when it came time to do the internet piece of it, I actually had to do a manual setup. And what I'm showing you right now is I'm going down to the network setup. I actually had to use a link to do mine. I couldn't go into my regular box, which is a Verizon box. And you can see there it was TP-Link. I had to do a manual setup. Now, I'm not going to go through the manual setup here because I'll have to re-enter the password and everything else. So I'm going to back out of this at this point. And I'm going to show you actually what I had to do was you would go into manual setup, you would enter the password, and then what you would do, and you can see in the settings here, is do a manual TCP/IP address. And in this case, I took 21. Almost all of the commercially available Wi-Fi that you have is probably going to default to 192.168.1.1, which you see there for both the domain name server as well as your gateway. And I just had 21. I don't have more than 19 devices hooked up to my network, the first slot being taken up, of course, by the Wi-Fi controller. But if you do, whatever number you have, just pick a number that's greater than that. But I had to manually set it up, and that's something you might have to do too. You might be frustrated and trying to get it to work with the automatic address, and just go ahead and do it manually like I did. Now I want to talk to you about multimedia capabilities of the box. There are many reviews out there right now that talk about just how wonderful it is in terms of graphics and how smooth it is and how awesome the pixels look. I'm not going to disagree with any of that, but I do think it's important for you to understand what some of the limitations might be. I'm going to try to put in a series of discs in and see what actually works with the box. You would think that with a multimedia capability that you'd be able to play music and you'd be able to play movies and you'd be able to do a variety of things. You see the internet hookup up there, and we're going to find out that that's not quite true. So the first thing is backwards compatibility. I think probably people recognize this, but it is not backwards compatible to any previous PlayStations. They're thinking about adding that as a web application later. You can see that the disc just goes there in the front, and it wasn't 100% obvious to me how you put it and take it out, but there's a visual sensor that you just push on the front there that's down below the light strip, and the discs come in and out. It took me a while to figure that out. You guys probably figured it out right away, but it took me a while longer. So here I'm trying to put in a regular music CD, commercially produced, so this isn't even something at home that I did. It's not an MP3 disc, it's not a home created disc, but just a regular commercial disc. And what you see there is a message that says unsupported disc. So it's not going to be able to play a CD. So far, it's not backwards compatible with your previous PlayStation games. It's not going to play a CD disc, and I'll just tell you, it won't do an MP3 disc that you put in, or a homemade disc either. Now I'm putting in a commercially available DVD, and it's you can't hear it because I've voiced over, but it's grinding and thinking, and okay, so it finally did recognize it as a DVD, and I'm going to go ahead and push the X to make it play. That's a little tip too. When it's recognizing the controller, if you've never used it before, you've got to push the little PlayStation icon on the front to make it work. Okay, so it looks like the DVD itself at least is starting up, and that's good. If you push the triangle, you get the little piece below that you see that's got some more information about the DVD itself. And I'm going to go ahead and just fast forward to the main menu. Okay, so that so far so good. And you can see the characteristics of it there. I'm just using the joystick to move around and try selections out. Looks like the aspect ratio might be off a little bit, but let's explore that a little bit more. I'm going to try and just see if it will let me do the different options. So I'm going to pick a different language than the default, just to see if it can jump around. Okay, that looked like it worked okay. And now let's try maybe a scene selection. I'm not going to play the whole movie for you, obviously, but let's just see what happens. So that actually does appear to be a bit of an issue with the aspect ratio. It looks like it's cut off on the left and something's kind of repeating on the right. I don't want to spend a bunch more time dwelling on this. It looks like it's going to be able to do some basic kind of playing with the DVD, but you might have some problems, especially with older ones, with getting them to work. There is one more area that I wanted to talk to you about today, so I'm going to go ahead and eject out that disc, and you remember how to do that. Just touch that light strip up front, and out comes the disc, so that's relatively straightforward. But it's supposed to have some pretty good capability to deal with internet media as well. So you just go up to the World Wide Web, and you can get to locations. The navigation is relatively straightforward, and it's all labeled, and so I give them good credit for that. This is just my website, and I went from there and I checked out YouTube, and the good news is that it does play YouTube videos, and there's some neat features, like if you push the square, it'll go to full screen, and toggle back and forth with that, so that's pretty cool. And moving the joystick back and forth lets you move around on the page. So I wanted to test out and see if it would play just some common internet media. So the first thing I tried out was a MP3 files. And you'll see here I'm going to click on that, and what does it say? Doesn't work with the PS4. So that was actually probably the most shocking thing so far. So I said, well, let's try a WAV file. Doesn't work with it either. And again, just quite surprising. So this isn't really designed to be any kind of a flame or anything against Sony. My kids and I have been huge fans of Sony since the PlayStation 1 and earlier with all kinds of multimedia devices, and still with the music that I produce and other things, I use a lot of Sony products. And this is actually being done on Sony Vegas Pro and being edited in Sony Acid Pro. So I'm a big Sony fan, but I think that if you're going to shell out $400 to $1,200 for a system, you probably ought to be aware of the limitations. So again, I'm not going to talk about the gameplay at all. There's lots and lots of reviews out there about that. And there's many comparisons between the Xbox One now and the PlayStation 4. And again, I'm leaving that all alone. But I just wanted to tell you from a multimedia standpoint, some of the things I was looking at doing with the box, in addition to game playing, it really just doesn't have the capacity that I would have imagined that it did. Some of that I can imagine could be corrected with software updates later. For example, initially I could not log into the PlayStation Network at all, just wouldn't let you do it. And then they came out the very next, 3 days later, with an update to the software. You went to 1.5 and then 1.51, and that lets you now get in the PlayStation Network. But I expect that with new systems there'll be some hiccups. I would think that they would be able to do a software update that would let you play CDs and MP3 files and WAV files as part of the system. So I'm looking forward to that. So Sony, if you're listening, I'd ask that those would be some of your new updates. For those of you watching, you might want to hold off on buying initially unless you're strictly going to do game playing. So that's all I've got. Hope you have a great day, and thanks for listening.